If you see me with this beautiful smile, it's because I am imagining a gender equal world. A world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that is diverse yet equitable and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can forge women's equality. Collectively, we can all break the bias. Joining us today as we go hard on women's issues and how far we've come as a country, just on the back of the Independence Day that we celebrated, how far we've come as a country and how much more we can do for our women, our mothers, our sisters, our wives, our girlfriends, all in all. One of my guests is staring at me right now. Anyway, joining us for the conversation, Dr. Juliet Ohiming Ntiamwa, an environmental engineer in the United States. We also have Awo Idam, Executive Director, Child Online Africa. There's Enyonam Manye, CEO, The Ghanaian Farmer. And boy, are we going to have a lot to talk about. We also have Selassie Irabna Chega, Executive Director, Human Rights Advocacy Center. All of them join the conversation. Enyonam is here in the studio, all the others via Zoom. Ladies, thank you so much for joining the conversation and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to ensure that everyone is on board. Can you, if you can hear me, can you all say, break the bias?
Break the bias.
Break the bias. Break the bias.
Okay, so we have everyone on board. Let me start with you, Dr. Ntiamwa. As an environmental scientist, I'm sure there's a lot that you can say in these times, where we're headed, global warming and all of that. But I want us to start from the standpoint of what we're celebrating today, women. We've come a long way, I was mentioning earlier in the course of the news review, from women not being able to even exercise the franchise in certain countries, not being counted, not being able to drive, having to be escorted. I mean, I know the picture, you're getting the picture. But when you look at today's woman compared to, let's say, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, in Ghana and beyond, what are some of the monumental gains that we've seen that we should be celebrating on a day like this?
Okay. Thank you for having me on this August occasion to talk about women and the gains we've made over the years. I think that, if we'll all be honest, when we look at our communities or even in our schools, we see that programs that, hitherto did not have women pursuing. And for someone in the sciences, I can say that, when I was even in KNUST between 2008 to 2012, in the Department of Environmental Science, we didn't have any woman, let's say, full lecturer or senior lecturer, right, in our department. But now we have one. Now it's not, let's say, a number that we are proud of. We wish there were more, but at least there is some improvement. And I think by extension, this is not different in other sciences. Now we have, more women or more young ladies enrolling in science and engineering programs than before. So these are areas where we can see, obvious gains, right? Now, if your daughter tells you she wants to do engineering or she wants to do the sciences, or even that she wants to even finish university, it's not so much a shock, or it's not so much of a surprise. So these are areas where I can say that we've made gains, in our education system. When we look at areas of leadership, of course, we've seen, some increase in women representation, but of course, the numbers are still not encouraging and a lot more needs to be done. But we'll pause here and celebrate the gains.
Beautiful way to set the tone for the conversation. Let me get to Selassie. And Executive Director, of course, Human Rights Advocacy. For you, Selassie, what are the standout points, if I asked you, within the last few decades that you have seen women achieve, those feats that you feel are worthy of celebration? For me, in this country, I've seen a few more. The statistics are very imbalanced when you look at women CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and all of that. I do know we have the statistics, but I have seen some advancement, and these are things that I celebrate, though they are not enough. For you, what are the standout things that you celebrate in Ghana and beyond?
Thank you for having me on this important day. I think for Ghana, we have such a huge informal sector, especially when it comes to business. And I find that something that has pleased me recently is seeing more women mates in the trotros, because that has characteristically been a male-dominated industry. We don't think of it as an industry per se, but that's one of the things that I find encouraging. There's also the fact that, like Dr. Juliet said, more young girls are getting into STEM education, and the fact that we can have these conversations where girls are encouraged to pursue the sciences and maths and become engineers. When I was younger, these things weren't happening. There was still I remember there used to be this public service video that was played on GTV, send your girl child to school. There was still that debate happening.
Send your girl child to school.
Exactly. There was still that debate about the significance of sending girls to school in the first place. But we find that increasingly, even the fact that we are sitting here as women in these positions is an achievement that I think is important we celebrate.
Okay, let's come to Enyonam, who is right here in the studio. And let me find out from you very quickly, Enyo. So for you, women, in the course of all of this, and I know you will definitely be veering into agriculture.
Of course.
And what women are doing there.
Right.
What are some of the things we ought to be celebrating, looking at and saying, go our women in Ghana and beyond?
Thank you very much. Our women are doing extremely a lot. Some time past, when agriculture is mentioned, it is our fathers, it is the men. And I see my mother cook a meal from the house. She would, carry me to take it to the farm and go and give to my dad and brothers, or I would escort her, whilst I'm carrying the water, she's holding the meal, and then we go together and serve them. But in recent times, women have dared themselves to become farmers. And so when you watched my interviews, I interviewed some women in Adan who are into clam business, clam production, that day that we enjoy. When you get to the Sogakope Bridge, you see women carrying that day. It's not just the men who go to harvest, but when you go to Adan, there's a riverside called, I've forgotten the name, but the women they go diving.
They dive as well?
Of course. The women go diving themselves to harvest the clam. And that is very, very insightful and interesting. We have women, Fafape, who is in somewhere East Legon. She's the mushroom queen. She has a big
Fafape, yes. She is the mushroom queen.
Thank you very much. She has a big mushroom farm, and she's doing extremely well. We have Alberta of Agri House Foundation, who recently brought together over 50 queen mothers who are into agriculture in their various regions. So these stories is something worth celebrating. It is something worth encouraging, that we no longer sit home and just cook the meal and go serve you the men in the farm, but we equally carry the hose with you. Go whilst you are working on 1 acre, we are equally working on 1 acre. And these stories are worth celebrating. So I'm happy, I'm excited that I'm chatting this part. I am empowering young women that, listen, if you have completed JSS, SHS, or even university, and you haven't got an office work, we all can be like you. I mean, wearing the tie. Let's get into the field and produce the food for you to cook.
You just had to take a dig at me there. No, but not all of us definitely can. And one thing we often mistake, we tend to be, especially in our part of the world, we tend to be skewed more towards doing this. Maybe, I never thought I'd be doing this anyway, but we tend to be skewed more towards donning a nice suit and a tie and, sitting, pencil pushing,
Yes.
if you like. But the Makola woman, okay, what we often miss as young people, some Makola women make much more in a day than probably I would make in a month.
Exactly.
That's a reality.
Exactly.
So sometimes we push certain things away. Oh, this one, dear. But it takes getting into it.
Exactly.
Some farmers are making, I know women carpenters,
Yes.
who are into furniture making and
Yes.
stuff, who are making mind-blowing, raking in mind-blowing revenue. And I'm here, sitting here. I'm not saying I'm a pauper or that I am, but I'm just saying that
Right.
that picture, there's a whole lot more to it. And it's not just sitting here maybe with a suit and tie.
No, you should go to the northern. I just came back from the northern region a few weeks ago, and I met Tiyumba women. It's a shea butter processing center, and
Right.
it's all women sitting down, going through all this process. And I know you use shea butter.
All
At
the
the
time,
end
that's
of
what
the
I
day,
use.
yes, these women go to the farm, pick the shea nuts one after the other, carry it to the center, and go through the entire go through the entire process before you have your finished shea butter that you use back home. So women are pushing the barriers now. We are breaking the bias. We are occupying certain spaces. You mentioned COOs, CEOs, Director Generals, the World Trade Organization. We have a woman who is the Director General. So it means
Right.
that we are breaking the bias. We are occupying those spaces that formerly we were not.
Right.
Yes.
Not to
so-
mention the fact that in many countries, Ethiopia has its own situation in terms of women representation in their parliament. If I'm not mistaken, about 50% or more. We have New Zealand with a female leader, some of the Scandinavian countries. We have Croatia.
Exactly.
We've had Liberia and then in Ethiopia as well. I think the PM, not the PM, the other lady, I've forgotten her full name. But interesting strides. And again, when it comes to agriculture, we often fail to see that women are actually the backbone of our agriculture.
Exactly.
All the other things that in many parts of the country, especially up north, women are the ones farming, doing certain things. They are part of the conveyor belt of how we get our foodstuff in here. So there will be a whole lot more to talk about in respect of that. But let me come to our item, Executive Director, Child Online Africa. I'd like to ask you a pointed question based on our history as a country. We've celebrated 65 years. I don't want to know how old you are. That wouldn't be fair to put you on the spot. But looking at what you saw, let's say in Ghana, growing up, in terms of women matters, and when you consider them today, what do you think has changed that we ought to be celebrating?
Right. Good morning to your viewers, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm surprised you have decided to domesticate my issue. And
we can start from here and broaden it.
To globalize it.
Exactly.
But then I am not going to take it directly from where you've given me, but then I will take it from the technology point of view. We used to be at a stage where very little is said of science and technology as far as women are concerned. But then way back, I think around 1996, thereabout, when the STEM education has become the thing of attraction, most women and girls are encouraged to engage in such sector. So now, from there and now, we could see a number of women who are in technology, a number of women who are in fintech, a number of women who are in innovation, developing concepts for sanitary pad and what have you. But then when we come to the issue again of women and their participation, I don't think we're doing quite well when it comes to our parliament, because we still have recording low numbers in parliament. And I would have wished that by now we are par with Ethiopia, like you rightly cited. But then unfortunately, we aren't there. And then again, we don't just want the women, in as much as we want the representation, we want them to be proactive and be representing women and girls' voices in parliament. So I am sad to say that even though we've achieved a lot, so to speak, we are still not there yet. And I am so sad on this day to tell you that we still have 20% import tax levy on sanitary pad, which is something very fundamental that a young girl needs to use. So that is why I am not so enthused about the celebration on this day, because we are indirectly perpetuating the bias against girls and women.
Wow. What a way to start off the premise there, and the taxation on sanitary pads and all that. Is it a no-brainer? I mean, is it something that you would urge that we immediately start, policies on to get rid of?
In fact, we have been talking about this way back 2015. Politicians have made commitments in one way or the other. Some of them have stated it in their manifestos. And the NPP government did that. And as I now, 2 years from the time it was mentioned in the manifesto, we haven't seen a thing happen. And we're putting up one district, one factory. None of these are focused on that particular product.
Right.
We are producing cotton in the north. Can't we just channel that rightly if we are really into the issue? So for me, that is the problem. We are celebrating the day, but it's not enough to celebrate the day when we cannot impact the lives of young people and women as we have them.
Interesting dynamics. Now let's get into something else that none of us can avoid. And we've spoken about women in agriculture, we've spoken about women in education, STEM, if you like. We've spoken about women doing different things and the many handicaps you face. But let's start looking at some of the biases. Today, as we have that global theme, break the bias, we'd like to see the areas where women are facing the stiffest forms of bias and what we can do about them, from the workplace to even the nucleus of society, the home. I'll start with you, Doc, on this bit. Where do you feel the most, from where you sit, that you see the greatest biases personally against you and against women you know? And what do you feel we should be doing? Where should we be inching towards in dealing with some of those issues?
Okay, thank you. So I think when we talk about bias, I would expect any woman on this panel and even any woman watching us, must have experienced it one way or the other. Personally, I think where I've seen, bias, really in my face, if I should say, has been in the area of my career development, being it at a university and also even at work. Wow. I remember when I had just finished KNUST, right? I was working, in the oil and gas industry, and a former classmate, called and said, "Hey, Julia, I'm looking for, opportunity in your area." And I know that I had gotten that opportunity, because I had finished with first class from KNUST, because that was how I got it. And I told my friend that, there was a position here, but, our junior classmates, so and so will be coming in, based on merit. And he just, fled and said, as for the department, they just give the opportunities to the women. And I paused and I said, "Hey, who was the best student in our class?" He said, "You." I was like, "Okay, who is the best student in, this other class that this girl is coming to work here?" He mentioned the girl's name. I was like, "Okay, so say they give the opportunities to the best students."
Wow.
Don't just say they give the opportunities to the women, as if I'm not deserving, but you agreed I was the best student in our class, so would say they give to the best students. So these are some of the examples of how bias shows itself. I remember in the workplace too, I was leading what we call toolbox talks. So toolbox talks is when early in the morning, let's say around 6 a.m., you meet all the operators on the yard and you talk about some safety issues and all of that. I always did my research, and I was the only female in, among about 150 men at a time. and I would go through the safety topic for the day and everything. And like I said, I do my research and try to do a good job. So I was getting good feedback from the people,
Right.
and my boss was also hearing the good feedback. Guess what one colleague said to me one day?
Tell me.
Juliet, is it true you're doing a very good job, or you're just dazzling them with your
Wow.
features?
How did that hit you when that colleague asked that?
It really hit me, but I think I just froze. I couldn't really believe that he said that to me. And this was just, 2014, right? So not too long ago.
Right.
And people have these perceptions about women in our society. So if you are doing a good job, or if you are a woman rising through the ranks, the immediate thoughts that comes to someone's mind is, who is she sleeping with? Who is sponsoring her? These are biases that are still persistent, that we've not eliminated in our society.
And if I may just interject, usually when you see a woman, and we see them now across the tech world and all of that, areas where maybe even a few decades ago, you wouldn't see a lot of women, though it's still a very small number. And immediately, oh, this one, she must have done something. That's the rhetoric. That's what you would usually hear. And that is much of a problem, isn't it? Because it's not so much about policies, it's about the thinking of the ordinary person on the streets here. And that will take time to eradicate.
Exactly. And we hope that through conversations like this, people become more aware and, try to get rid of some of these biases. Yeah, so that has been some of my very,
right.
I would say,
your brushes with bias.
Let
me come to our, for you, what core areas, and I would like to know, even growing up, I know in school and all of that, sometimes even at home, in the nuclear setting, you would see certain things. I have friends who have told me that their siblings who are male, and I know this might be tricky, were given more educational opportunities, taken to certain places that they were not given opportunities to go to when they were in fact better than the boys. So all of these things are in there. But what have been the biases that you have faced growing up? And what do you think, for example, about affirmative action when it comes to areas where women are lagging behind?
Again, thank you. Biases that I faced growing up, I don't think I have much to share in that respect.
Okay.
Because I'm the only girl among boys. And I recall we had a schedule, we had a timetable designed by my mom. So everybody does the cooking. And in fact, when we are done cooking, my brothers will scale you, score you as to what you have done. Sometimes they will tell you the rice is too hard. My brother did better and all. And I felt those were fair judgments. And I think I'm growing up being a mother of boys now. I'm growing up raising my boys in that kind of light, because I really don't perceive anything to be a woman's role, nor another to be a man's role. Whatever you want to do, you perceive that. When it comes to the issue of affirmative action, I'm not an authority in that area, but the little I have done in terms of ways to stopping violence against girls in schools, which translates into womanhood and all of that, I feel that we're trying to implement the thing in abstract. I am of the view that before we implement such interventions, it will be appropriate for us to come down to the grassroots. There are a number of young women who are not equipped as the elite. But then as like the conversation is taking place at the higher level, where those places are being filled. But unfortunately, because they haven't tackled it from the bottom up, it's difficult for those women to bring up the lower level ones to their level. Sometimes it becomes even a competition at their level to get other women involved. So, which is why some of the initiatives we have now, which are prone to encouraging young girls to take part in ICT and all of that. I applaud them a lot. But as to how sustainable they are is one thing we need to interrogate, because most often when we have money from donors to undertake an intervention, yes, we utilize those funds. Once the fund is over, there's nothing like a transition or sustainability plan into the project. So our local funds are not able to sustain the programs, and those programs die off. We made mention of Send Your Girl Child to School. That was a fantastic program, but it got exhausted along the line. Another one came for another 5 years from USAID. Then when that one was done, nothing else goes on now with girls' empowerment or girls' education. And we feel that we even have equal numbers, which is not the reality. We still have young girls dropping out of school due to pregnancy and other issues. We have young girls dropping out of school because of online abuses, because maybe their images are online, which makes it difficult for them to now show their faces in public. We have a lot of women in professional settings who are being harassed every now and then. My sister just shared one. There are quite a number of them. Once you are in a male-dominated regime or setup, it's very likely you are seen to be that gendered person who is supposed to be tormented in one way or the other, which should not be the case. So for me, those prejudices that are held against women or girls should be tactfully handled such that it will not go a long way to affecting the whole agenda of gender equality at the end of the day. And that will only take a concerted effort from us as individuals, from the community, from government, and then from other decision makers.
Right. And poignant the way you paint the picture, and I would say fortunate the sort of background you had, because in other instances it would have been the girl doing all the cooking, and the boys wouldn't have been brought into the picture at all. But Selassie, for you, especially in the area where you work, human rights advocacy, where have you seen the most prejudice personally and in relating to other women with human rights issues? Where do you see the most prejudice against women in that context?
Thank you. For me, I had an upbringing that was quite similar to the way Awo was raised. Everybody did work at home. Everybody did everything, and so
Right.
there wasn't that discrimination or bias. But I have found that in stepping out of my home into society, the biases that I have faced were with reference to my opinions and having strong opinions. I've had people literally tell me that your husband will suffer with the way Obadin ding and like statements such as that. And I wasn't raised to cower in the face of diverse opinions. I was raised to express myself and to research my thoughts and express them. So that for me was a little bit of a shock going out into society. And I find in our work, that women, and this is something that I have also experienced, there's still the bias around men's ownership of women's bodies and their lives. There's still a lot of that where a man approaches a woman he doesn't even know and feels like he can enter her personal space and touch her, and there's not that awareness that that's a violation of a woman's rights. There's not that awareness that the things that men will not do to each other, or even the things that they would do to themselves, you still have to respect a person's boundaries. I also find that amongst ourselves as women, there's that bias. There are those biases that we have against each other. I remember this experience I had in a trotro one time. There was traffic at an intersection, and one of the women said, as in with reference to the police service personnel directing the traffic, that if you go and check, there's this much traffic because it's a woman. And
In other words, she's not capable, and that's why we're facing the circumstance we're facing. That was the suggestion.
Exactly. And we have that a lot amongst ourselves as women. And I think that fundamentally like Awo mentioned, we had these really good programs that were encouraging girls to go to school and expand themselves and be something beyond just staying at home. But we find that fundamentally that idea that a woman's place is in the kitchen, that a woman cannot be in the political space or in the organizational or tech space, is so ingrained in us and in the people that are raising the next generation of women that there has to be a core mindset shift. That's what I think.
And you've mentioned some very important things. But Enyo, as I come to you in the studio, how real is that for you? You know, you're doing what you're doing, the sphere you operate in, agriculture. Somehow men feel it's a macho thing, it's a man thing. What sort of discrimination have you faced in here? And have people ever made you feel, you're a woman, what are you doing in this industry? Share your story with us.
Right, so interesting. You know that more than half of Ghana's agriculture space, the labor force is made of women.
Like I mentioned earlier.
And 70% of the Ghana food stock produced are largely produced by women. Last year, the 2021 award, we had about 37 women being awarded as against a total number of 165. I get people, I think in some of the regions I've visited, I got one gentleman pulling me aside and saying, background again. I said I did PR journalism. He said, so we are there. I say, I am here to project the works of farmers. And so that is what I am doing. And I have my own little thing I'm doing as well. Can you imagine I paid someone to prepare a place for me to go into snail farming until date? The carpenter consumed or spent my money and has still not put up the structure. The last time I caught up with him, he said, oh, madam, do you think if it's a man? Be honest with me.
So sometimes even the way they, and you know, this brings to mind a bit of a story. A friend told me once that she had employed an artisan to come and do something for her in her home. I think a carpenter, I think it was a plumber. And this man comes in, he's doing his work, yes. She gets the feeling that, and she's very on top of some of these matters, how much things are so far out there. But he seems to think she doesn't know. And so he wants to overcharge her. But I think what really rubbed her the wrong way was the fact that gentleman at a point just walks into her fridge, takes out a bottle of chilled water, no permission sought, takes out some food, and she comes out, sees him, and she's like, I mean, in her mind, she's thinking,
what's going on?
What the heck? And he feels, oh, you're a woman, there's no man in the house, so I am, that's the feeling.
Yes.
I guess, that's the feeling. And I wouldn't tolerate that, so obviously, you shouldn't think that a woman would.
So he had charged me money, I have paid for the services.
Right.
And I asked him, where is the structure I needed to expand my snail farming? And all he could tell me was that I'm busy working for other people, so relax, it will be your turn. And I said, that was not the agreement. So I keep hearing people call me on phone every time, and they ask me, so what inspired you? It looks as if me going into agriculture or me going into farming is so strange. But that should not be anything strange.
Right.
It's a usual vocation that anybody gets involved in. And so that is where my passion has led me, and I'm doing to the best of my knowledge.
Has some of those, or have some of those interactions, you know, impacted you negatively? You know, got you thinking again that, am I really in the right sphere? Have any doubts been sowed in your mind on the back of some of these encounters, like the one with the man, oh, your background is PR. What are you doing here? I mean, we ought to talk about them, because in the end, some people even don't mean ill, but the things they say work on the minds of the women they speak to. Has that impacted you negatively in any way?
Of course it has. I must be honest, because the fact that you have to hire the services of cameramen, equipment, transportation, paying for hotels, and taking crew along to go and produce the content. And people call you, instead of them giving you thumbs up, instead of them sharing messages to encourage you, and he's asking, what are you doing here? What benefit are you? So what are you getting? So it means that the resources I'm using to project the works of people within this sector, including myself, it means that I'm wasting my money, or I'm wasting my resources. And the painful part is when such content are on television and even getting sponsorship is hard. It means that...
Is it harder because you're a woman? Do you feel sometimes even getting sponsorship, breaking into the corporate world, doing certain things, it's harder because you're a woman?
It could be 50-50 from that angle. At times you take proposals, to go and have discussions with marketing managers or CEOs, and it tells a different story. So at times you sit back and you wonder, so how do I go about it? Because if you should go, it's a man-to-man talk. But when a lady goes, the story becomes different. So at times it's very hard. It's extremely difficult for me to even step out there to go, take out proposals, seeking for sponsorship, or at times you go to the field. And I think the other day I almost drowned somewhere in Asamankese. There was a river, and I had to cross. The men were crossing. I have to cross. So I asked someone, he said, so cross. And by the time I tried jumping, I almost fell into, the stream.
Wow.
Yes, so this is some of the things.
So we're basically saying you think you can do what a man can do, so do it and let's see.
Jump and let's go. So jump, and I'm like, really, you have to help me because this is difficult for me, but I can't stop. I can put an end to it because we need to know about the stories of these farmers and what they are doing. How best it is out of these documentaries that stakeholders, both local, international organizations that have funding to help the agri space, get to know what is going wrong, where we can strengthen our policies, and where we can implement what. But when I am trying, I recently on a motorbike to some of the farm, I crashed my camera, the lens.
Right.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's expensive.
Thank you very much. I crashed it. But here I am. If I have the chance to go on the field again, I'll wear my Wellington boot and I'm off. So the bias is there. You are helping, but the stories or some of the feedbacks are so discouraging, it's so disheartening. But would you stop? We can't. If we want to break the bias, we have to look beyond this, commentaries. And still proceed.
We definitely have to look beyond them. And as I come back to you, Dr. Ntiamwa, I am going to ask some questions that are going to be very personal in a way, but we ought to put them out there because from personal experience, I noticed that a lot of people take certain things for granted. I'm talking about sexual harassment. Was it Enyonam? No, not Enyonam. Was it Selassie who was talking about men getting into women's space and feeling, I have every right to do so and all of that. No permission. It's okay. I'm your co-worker. I can hug you whenever I feel like. Let's talk about sexual harassment issues and what exactly you face. The things that you wouldn't want to happen, but somehow men think it is normal to do these things. And maybe link it, I'll come to you, Enyonam, on the bit about even seeking sponsorship, whether sometimes people want to take advantage of some of these things. But let's start with you, at Doc.
When we talk about sexual harassment, it can be verbal, it can, it might not always be about touching. But, sometimes words, somebody can look at you from top to down and say, oh, you look sweet or something.
Basically ogling you. You can tell you are like a piece of meat and they are just looking at you.
Yes. So all those things, I think sometimes we don't really put a lot of emphasis on that, but it happens a lot. Women just hear things at the workplace or in schools, just because somebody feels that they can just make any comments at all. So those things go a long way to really put a lot of pressure on you when, let's say, you're even trying to dress up for work or even dress up. You think about, what are people going to say? Will this attract somebody to, say something or even touch me? But in actual sense, how I dress should not, should not encourage you to do anything to me, or should not encourage you to touch me anyhow or say anything to me. But it's something, we've had to ask ourselves, or we have to take into consideration before we step out. Personally, I've already shared some comments, that I've seen at the workplace. In Trotro, when I was in Ghana, I realized, I remember there was a time I was sitting in Trotro and I just felt this, movement on my lap. And I had my bag on my lap. So I thought, okay, maybe it's my phone vibrating or something. So I checked my bag and I brought my phone out and it was not, vibrating, or nobody was calling me. And then I put it back in. And then I felt the movement again. Long story short, I lifted my bag and then the guy sitting next to me had his hand on my lap. And I mean,
he had his hand on your lap.
This happened to me in Trotro. And I looked at him and I was shocked. I was like, what the heck?
I'm sure you were shocked, totally shocked.
I was very shocked. And, he said, oh, sorry. And I was like, wow, somebody could just do this. And others or other women have even suffered worse, scenarios. In our workplaces, I think one of the things that I want to highlight is we mostly hear women, I think at least we've had a friend or two whose maybe boss has made advances at her. And if, she didn't succumb, probably suffered job loss, right? In our schools or in our universities, we have professors or lecturers, requesting for sex and then, in return for a good grade. And
that is one of the worst situations, because you have someone who is up there and you are down there, and you know that this person can impact your academic record. It's a very tricky, it's like being caught between the devil and the deep blue sea.
And my concern with all of this, especially for workplace and even in schools, is we don't really have any channel of reporting.
Yeah.
There is no policy. I mean, you go to companies and they have maybe environment, health, and safety policy printed on the wall,
right?
Or, several policies, but companies or even institutions don't have any reporting channel. So if you're a woman and you go through this, you go and chat about it with your friends and ask them, what do I do? Yeah. And some say, okay, maybe find another job or something. If you go to any police station to say, oh, my boss is trying to do this to me, like they'll laugh at you.
Yeah.
Right? So we really need policies at the workplace, in schools, that protect women, and even maybe by extension men, anybody in a lower rank who suffers
in a vulnerable position, basically.
Yes, any form of sexual harassment. Thank you.
Very interesting, and you've segued into an area that I was just about to get into, because that's another bit. You go through, and thankfully here, our case is different at the multimedia group, but you go to other entities and they have practically nothing. There's nothing. It's free for all, And I'll just share the story. A friend told me something some time back that left me shaken, even as a man. She had been told to go to this man, elderly man, old enough to be close to being her grandfather. Respectable man in this country. And she was going there because she was working on a project and needed some funding. She gets into this man's office thinking everything is okay. And all of a sudden, the man is staring at her like, and I don't want to sound old, but the way he's looking at her, he's even telling her to turn around 360 degrees and all of that. Then she realizes that the place, he uses fingerprint to open his door. In other words, there's no means of escape. And the man is approaching her and he's doing this and that. So ultimately, she thought quickly and just realized, oh, let me play along with him. So she does it. She agrees to meet him somewhere on a set day. Once she got out of the office, that was it. But we see it so often. So as I come to you, Selassie, I'm sure in your line of work as well, you get to see some of these things. Do you have any personal experiences to share? And what more do you feel we should be doing in terms of regulating the workplace when it comes to sexual harassment?
Unfortunately, I have way too many stories of this to share. I've had experiences with men, and there's this thing that happens so often with men where they say, I want to be your friend and you should be nicer, you never know. And it's almost like a manipulative, compulsive way to get you to, I don't know, to acquiesce. And it happens way too often where at work they say, oh, it was just a joke, and yet it was sexually inappropriate. I remember when I was working in my early 20s, I actually used to, on my way home when I was walking along the street, I actually used to make sure that I could find weapons that I could use in case I was attacked. Because
weapons? Wow. It was that bad?
Yeah, along the street, just to feel safe, that if something happens, if someone tries to grab me. Because I've had instances where I'd be walking along the pavement and then men will try to grab me. So I started walking on the street. It just feels like at every turn, you are supposed to be protecting yourself in a society where you're supposed to be able to move about freely. And like Dr. Juliet said, it's too difficult for women to be able to report these things. It's too difficult for women to find support in instances like this, even from our fellow women. When these things happen in our homes, for instance, there are too many cases that we get, because we have a human rights clinic, there are too many instances where people say, oh, this is a family matter, we'll settle this at home. And yet, a person has been traumatized, has been sexually harassed, and these have psychosocial impacts. They leave lasting traumas. And I believe that we need to be more proactive and more vigilant in providing young girls and women with information about what the law says, about their rights, about what the resources are. But also in our schools and in our workplaces, there has to be policy that mandates that there are sexual harassment policies in organizations, that there are school counselors, there are people that girls can talk to. The society needs to emphasize the fact that women are equal human beings in society and need to be made to feel safe. It's unacceptable that women need to be conscious of how they dress and what they say and where they are at all times. Men don't have to deal with that.
Let me come to you, Awo. And before I take you on to another story, just very briefly came to mind. And I'm sharing it because this time I'm coming home to the media. Many years ago when I was on radio, and this story I'll never forget, I did this simply to prevent that young lady from getting into something she didn't want. Someone who was assisting me as an intern on one of my shows came to me and said, I have a friend. She wants to join your show. Actually, she went to this other media entity and wanted to be on a certain show. But the gentleman who is on the show made it clear to her that, yes, he could get her in, but he wanted to bet her first. So can you help her? I said, bring her, add her to the team. That was it. I just wanted to avoid the situation where this person would have taken advantage of her. And it is happening. It is true and it is out there. So as I come to you, Awo, on this self-same subject, what does it mean to you, the fact that in most workplaces, I mean, this is so rife, it's so rampant, and what would you like to see in 2022 being done to push this thing away when it comes to sexual harassment against women?
Okay, thank you again. In my line of work, I feel that sometimes by virtue of where you work and the position you hold predisposes you to an abuse, a form of abuse. And I'm taking into the digital space, online abuse. So your online presence becomes an avenue for you to be abused or for you to be taken for granted. And if cyber abuse is anything to go by, it means that women are disrespected more, or there's so much disrespect towards women online, because men feel that women have lesser values compared to them. And by that, they find a way of silencing them. So for me, going forward in 2022, as we mark this day, I would want to see a proactive action in a form of a research strategy, which is looking at collecting the trends of abuse of women online and finding ways of addressing them. Secondly, have in place flag points where people can easily touch and report. And mind you, it's not just a system of saying that we have a hotline or helpline in place, but these helplines should be designed in such a way that someone with a low digital literacy skills should also be able to report an incident. And this incident should be taken on board seriously for action to addressing them. Until that is done, we will have very little women speaking up, especially now that we are in an era where digitalization has become the order of the day. Right. We'll have less women's voices online, but we want to see more women expressing themselves. We don't want women to be silenced. We don't want women to be blocking people here and there. We don't want women to be logging out of spaces just because they feel harassed in one way or the other. So there are a number of women, again, who are more or less, I'll call them misogyny enablers. So they encourage other women to abuse fellow women without knowing. I don't know if it's without knowing or it's just by virtue of the fact that they gain to laugh or they want the downfall of the other woman. I don't know how to analyze that, but it's a trend we've also observed. So some women who are in leadership positions should be tactful enough not to be enabling abuse against other women.
Right. Let me come into the studio. So I was going to, and I've not forgotten, have any of these people who have come on board to sponsor you or who were going to come on board ever, have you had any such situation where these people are basically telling you, okay, I'm willing to invest in what you're doing, but something must happen?
Well,
does that happen? And is it dehumanizing if that has ever happened to you?
I think I remember, was it 2 years ago? I have 2 television shows, actually. There is Business Trends and then The Ghanaian Farmer. So it was Business Trends. I approached a top executive whom I just finished interviewing, and I told him, listen, I think from what your company stands to do in the corporate sector, we have something in common. So why don't you project your works and project on my platform in return for some funding? And he told me, oh, I like your concept.
He was excited.
Yes, I like your concept. You're actually doing well. But you have to do what your colleagues do so that you can get the funding as soon as possible.
That's what he told you?
Oh, yes.
You have to do what your colleags do?
Yes.
This person must have a lot of experience.
So I asked him, Honorable, what are my colleagues doing? He says, don't ask me to tell you. Just go and think about it. If you are ready, give me a call today, tomorrow. Any day you are ready, I will be ready for you. So that you meet
I might be looking for trouble for you here, but you just said honorable. Is this person a member of parliament?
Oh, he used to be. He's a public, a public person. Okay,
wow.
He's a public person, yes. So he says, yes, I'm interested. It's a nice concept, but you have to do what your colleagues do so that we can get this done and over with. So I left and I never went back. Anytime once in a while we talk, he said, as for you, with the radio. So you didn't come back? I said, no, it's okay. I'll find ways and means to go about it. So that's what I was told. And so I didn't go back. So I managed to find other ways of sustaining the show. And so I have heard the stories. Just yesterday, I was traveling to Akosombo to a farm. I took a picture on the Adomi Bridge and posted on my status. And there is this gentleman in the US who actually called me for farming-related matters, how to help him, get some people or work with some people. And his first comment was, is that you? I said, yes. The follow-up comment was, I have spoken to you on phone and I imagined that you're pretty, but I didn't know you are this extra pretty. And I'm like, what do you mean by?
I would have taken that as an insult. How did you take it?
I just said, I see. At times I have my way of handling things. You see, if my outburst didn't come right, you would rather feel offended that I'm being disrespected. Oh, when your name doesn't respect, when your name does. So I just read the comment, I smiled. The farmer who I was going with said, Enyo, what's happening? I said, just imagine this. He saw them, was like, really? What is the meaning of this? He didn't imagine you are this pretty. And so when I come to Ghana, I'd like to meet you. I said, I see.
Then no, boga for
So as for these comments, at times it make you, so because you've seen my videos on YouTube.
Right.
And that's how you contacted me. So when you tell me, I imagine you were pretty, but I didn't imagine you were this pretty. What are you saying then? What are you implying? Does it mean it's ugly women who do agriculture, or you didn't expect a fine girl to do agric? I mean, I hear this all the time, my dear. I just brush it off. It's as if I didn't hear anybody making such comments, and I proceed to the conversation, the reason why we are talking, or the reason why we are here. So these things, it makes you feel some way. If I say that it doesn't dehumanize me, it's a lie.
It dehumanizes you.
It does.
It makes you feel less human.
Yes, it does. But every time I try to encourage myself, and it's the regular thing. Just ignore it. And
There's something yesterday I found trending on Twitter in a certain thread. It was about, so someone had asked a lady out, and she had come together with another lady. And this person was suggesting that, oh, I would ignore the lady I asked out and go with the other lady. But it was interesting because another lady came and posted, and she also got bashing, but she posted that it could also be that, especially as a first time out with the person, for the person's own security, she's going with backup, if you like, so that the person would not, this man would not think that he is alone with her and he can do something of the sort. Of course, there were people talking about the fact that then she could have gone with a man, or the person could have been sitting on another table because it's a public place. But I guess all of these feed into the conversation. Is that something you would do? If you didn't trust, let's say, a man you were going out with, let's say a blind date, would you go with someone else? Just for the sake of safety?
I would not go with someone else, but I make sure wherever it is we are going to meet, it's a public place. There are a lot of people there. So mostly, I mean, I've gone on a few blind dates. But if I go, before I get to see the person I'm going to meet, I make sure I sit a bit distant, okay? So when you come, you will surely call, because we haven't seen in person yet.
Yes.
You will call. So I get to see who the person is, how you're looking like, your appearance. If it works for me, I get closer. If it doesn't, I find a way to run before anything happens.
Sharp.
Yeah, so,
right.
It's not necessarily for you to take someone with you, but you should find a public place where there are a lot of people. In a restaurant, in a mall, would he harm you there? No. So it's not really needed for you to.
Interesting. Let me come to Dr. Ntiamwa. So we've got to the point where I feel we should focus on the theme for this year's celebration and map the way forward as women, and I am an associate today. So how do we break the bias? I'd like to start with Dr. Ntiamwa on the standpoint of boys' training or education, because in the end, you would also notice that boys grow up in families, and sometimes it is women who give them certain mindsets, boys don't do this at home, and all of that growing up. And then they grow up with certain mindsets, mentalities that are very different, difficult to break, because it's said that you can train a sapling, a growing plant, but once it grows to a certain point, there's nothing you can do unless break it. How do we break the bias? From you, I'd like to hear in terms of boys trading, so that they have that orientation, and what else you have to add.
Okay, so I think even on this panel, we heard from Salasi and Awo their experience of growing up, right? The fact that their parents made everyone do something. So, from that background, you don't have it in your mind that, oh, this is for the woman, this is for the man. That is something that is lacking in most homes. And it's something that we need to speak about and encourage more homes to have this gender roles eliminated. So if you have a boy and a girl in your home, share the chores, share the chores equally, and even rotate. So let's say if this week Akosia is sweeping. Next week she'll be doing gardening, whilst the brother is doing, the sweeping. Rotate, share it equally among them. And I think that even from that, you'll be able to see that, okay, this one gravitates towards this, or this is, his or her preferred things to do in the house, and this one is gravitating towards this. So at the end of the day, the person both grow up not expecting only one person to be doing chores at home. And I think that when we look at the successes of women, in recent times, one of the key things that any successful woman would like to point out is the need for a supportive partner. So, and a grown-up man cannot just become supportive if he was not trained to share chores, if he was not trained to do certain things at home. So, charity begins at home, as we say that. So we need to encourage more families to raise their children by not focusing on gender roles. And I think that's one thing that we need to do is that we need to, put things in the minds of our young boys that, hey, instead of, previously when we used to, I think parents used to tell boys that, oh, your wife will be doing this for you, and rather tell women that if you don't learn how to do this, your husband is going to suffer and all of that. Let's erase all of those sayings and replace it with things like, Kojo, if you don't learn how to do this, one day you'll be on your own, you'll not be able to do this for yourself. And the same thing, even for the girls, you don't tell the girl that if you don't do this, you'll not be able to keep a man or anything. The girl needs to learn to do it for herself first. The same thing for the boy. He needs to do it for himself first. So these are the deliberate, deliberate actions, deliberate words that we need to say at home to make sure that as they are growing up with a renewed mindset. They're not expecting their wives to, come back from work and do everything for them. They feel that they're also part of the home. They are creating a home with their partners.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, I think that is how we can take it from the beginning. And some mothers have done that. I think we've already heard it here.
Yeah.
And my in-law also did that for my husband. So he's very supportive. He does everything.
Awesome. Selassie, as I come to you, a quick thought came to mind. Some years back, I am at Sunday school and there's a girl crying, a baby, so to speak. I think she's 2.5, 3, but she's still a baby. I pick her up and I'm, cuddling her and all that. Then one of the parents, we were ending the session. A parent comes through, a man. He looks at me and says, hey, he had been observing me for a while, and he says, hey, me, I can't do this. Oh, I can't. The way you are, I would definitely for the way you are taking care of her. And it struck me because he was a parent. I am not a biological parent yet. I was able to do that, and he, the parent, so you can imagine what he does in his house or how he would treat his children. But Selassie, so for you, how do we break the bias? What are the core areas to look at?
I think, like Dr. Juliet mentioned, and this is something that we try to do in our project interventions, because sometimes we skew our interventions too much towards the women and educating them, but then there are people who perpetrate these biases and these abuses, and so they also need to be educated. I watched a short documentary on Twitter some months back, and I stand to be corrected about the specific country, but I think it was in Kenya, and it was about gender-based violence. And they were talking to men in the community about abusing their wives, and these men were boldly stating that their mothers and their grandmothers had told them that sometimes a woman needs to be beaten when she's... And so we see that even from the very young age, how you raise the man determines how he views a woman, what he would do. And personally, my dad was a very hands-on father, right? And for him, he was raised by women. He was surrounded by women. And so his entire mindset in becoming a father was he wants to take care of his wife, his children. He wants to be. And so it really requires a very strong foundation. But the unfortunate thing is that some people don't have that foundation. So what do? We need to be able to renew their minds, as it were. And I think, and to do that to a certain degree, we need to expose men to the damage that is caused by abuse and these biases sometimes. They need to be in the same rooms as much as it is safe for the women to share those spaces with them. But they need to be aware that their actions and their words and their inactions even have consequences and have a certain effect. Now, women are not the same as men. We are different biologically and emotionally and all of these things. But women have great value in society. They have great value to men and to the society. And so men need to understand that when you limit what a woman can do, you're limiting yourself ultimately. You're limiting what your society can achieve. And I think that when we start to teach young men and even some of the older men these things, and we start to teach them the value of women, even outside of the fact that they are women, as human beings, right, that they have value. I think that those are some of the ways that we can start to break the biases. And also to teach women themselves that of their value and to teach them to speak up for themselves, because they also are impacted by these lessons that teach them that you are supposed to be quiet and don't share too strong opinions, right, and don't your places in the kitchen. Women need to learn to stand up for themselves.
Right. Women need to learn to stand up for themselves. For you, Awo, what would you be looking at in terms of breaking the bias?
All right. So I would say that online abuse is damaging to the individual involved, the family, and the society or community at large. So in order for us to have the sanity and an enabling environment for the growth of the individual, and especially women and girls, it will be important for us to make online safety and digital literacy a lifestyle, so that when a young person or women are online and they are confronted with issues beyond them, they know what to do and where to go for help. The other thing I would say has to do with our platform providers, the online platform providers, not only the mobile networks, but other platform providers. It would be important for them to look at things from the human rights perspective. So having a design which takes into consideration people's abilities, people's maturation, people's special needs, just so the platform will be that inclusive enough to help support the growth and nurturing of the individual or the users of those platforms.
Right.
And to government, I would want government to go the extra mile by putting in place protective measures. And these protective measures should not be limited to just having one act which addresses one form of abuse, but the extra protection which will take into consideration the user's needs, and then again, make the service providers more accountable and responsible for the users. Just so when something happens, we know what to do and how to address them. Okay. So for me, those are the 3 pointers I'll have for way forward.
All right. I'll wrap in the studio with Enyonam. You get the final bite of the cherry. What would be for you what you want to see when it comes to breaking the bias? Today and beyond, what do you want to see on the national level and beyond?
Right, so I will take it from the agri sector, because
okay,
I'll speak for my women in the agriculture space. Now, when it comes to breaking the bias in the agriculture space, I would request from government and other relevant stakeholders that we need to consider improving access to productive inputs, such as land, such as fertilizer, improved seeds, pesticide, the services of extension officers. As we speak, I was in the north, like I said, and it is clear that women cannot have access to land unless a man is the one leading the way. So we would use this day to wish all women happy International Day, but the focus is that all women in agriculture, we are contributing our quota. As a result, these services should be improved. They should help us have quick access to our fertilizers. We should be able to walk to the chief or to any family head and request for a person.
Like any man would do.
Thank you very much, like any man would do. So if you're out there and you have any form of support to push a woman or encourage a woman, empower a woman in agriculture, God bless you, and don't think twice before giving that support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies, for joining the conversation. Ladies without gentlemen. I'm the lone gentleman standing, but very important discussion on International Women's Day. And I think it's only fitting that as I wish you a happy International Women's Day, we cross our hands as we seek to break the bias. Yes, we break the bias. Dr. Juliet Ohiming-Ntiamwa is an environmental engineer in the United States. Our item is Executive Director, Child Online Africa. Enyona Manye, the very beautiful. Enyona Manye, CEO of the Ghanaian Farmer, and Selassie Irabna Chega, Executive Director, Human Rights Advocacy Center. Thank you so much for joining.